It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello, and here we go, everybody. I'm so excited. It is Thursday, March 19th, 2020, which means it's the premiere of my podcast, Engage, Educate, and Empower. Now, this is going to be a weekly podcast aired every Thursday on, I think it's 11 different social media and podcast channels. And every week I will interview a very special guest who shares not only the same vision that I have, but are committed to help our kids everywhere. Topics we're going to discuss include mental health awareness and mindfulness, mental illness and suicide in children, teenagers, and young adults, bullying, foster care, adoption, addictions, you name it. We're really going to cover all the topics that kids today are finding stressful and life challenging. And every guest will be able to speak to the specific topic that week. Now, as it's every Thursday, I'm going to try and cover a vast array of topics, but every single month I will always have one guest speaker on that can talk to a mental illness or disorder in kids, and also a guest speaker who can talk about bullying and bullycide. Other guest speakers will talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and toxic stress, the problems with adoption and what these kids have to face. Same is true with foster care. It goes on and on, but I think the aim of myself and all my guests is that we want to engage, educate, inspire, motivate, and empower not only kids, but also adults everywhere, be it parents, family members, siblings, teachers, counselors, health professionals, or just members of the public. I think it takes a village to raise a kid. That's been said forever and ever and ever. And it's true. And never more so do we need to all stand together and try and help our children, our teenagers, young adults, navigate the world that they are dealing with. Not only at home, but also in the community and especially at school. School is no longer the safe haven that our children and teenagers go to. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my very, very, very first guest of this premiere podcast. And it's a gentleman that I had the pleasure of connecting with a couple of years ago, and we both wrote books, and we both share the same vision. So here we go. My very first guest is Mr. Thomas Dahlborg. Now, Thomas has had more than 35 years of experience leading, serving, and coaching. Tom also volunteers for a wide range of non-profit organizations and loves his time spent sponsoring and coaching young men's basketball. Tom cares deeply about helping individuals, teams, and communities achieve their mission while living their values, and cherishes the opportunity to engage in meaningful and impactful ways. He is a child advocate and international voice for children, specifically in the areas of stop bullying and its devastating impact. Tom recently contributed to the new book out of the UK, Bullied Back to Life, and he is the author of his own book, The Big Kid and Basketball, and the lessons he taught his father and coach. Through his writing and speaking, Tom is working to put an end to bullying and mitigate the impact of ACEs for both children and adults. And interestingly, The Big Kid and Basketball was written about Tom's own son, Tommy, and his experiences with bullying in school. And I'm really pleased to tell you all that Tommy is going to be one of our upcoming guests. So we're going to break for a very quick commercial break. And when we return, everybody, I'd love to introduce you to Mr. Thomas Dahlborg.
For more information about Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses from Tracey herself, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. Be sure to catch the latest news on mental health and Tracey's guests on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. While you're visiting TraceyMaxfield.com, make sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Keep track of Tracey with upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles on important mental health issues. Plus, when you subscribe, you'll get a copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. For more information and to sign up, go to TraceyMaxfield.com. Parents, do you worry about your children or teens? Do they have issues they don't talk to you about? Go to TraceyMaxfield.com to sign up for Tracey's informational courses. Tracey has brought connection to parents and teens all over the world. To learn more, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. A brighter future is possible.
So welcome back, everybody. And as promised, I would like to introduce you to my very first Engage, Educate, and Empower podcast guest, Thomas Dahlborg. Welcome, and thank you so very much.
Oh, Tracey, I've been so excited about joining you on this podcast, what you're doing, the message you're putting out there, and the amount of incredible people that combine heart and mind to make things better, especially in the bullying space or the anti-bullying space. Just, it's inspiring. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. So before we get into a lengthy discussion, because we have lots to share about bullying, first of all, I mentioned the book and the fact that your son Tommy, what the book is about, is actually going to be a guest on a future podcast. But for all the listeners and viewers, can you tell me just a little bit about The Big Kid and Basketball?
Sure. It really began, the book, The Big Kid and Basketball, really began as a journal. As my son was being bullied, and he was being bullied predominantly by adults.
Wow.
My bride and I, we thought we were the worst parents ever. We everything we tried made things worse, quite frankly. And so we were going through this journey with my son, and he started being bullied by adults when he was 4 years old.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And Tommy was born with neurological challenges. He was a big child. And just one example, I remember he was going out to play with his friends, and his friends were all in the yard right next to us, so we could see him from the house. And then they were going to go into his friend's house, and his mother was greeting all these children as they were lining up to come in the front door, and Tommy was last in line. And by the time he got to the front door, she looked at him and she said, and she yelled, "Tommy, you can't come in. You are too big."
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so he came running home, crying, devastated. Here's my bride and I trying to, first we didn't know what happened, of course, and then he eventually told us the story. And it was really from that point on that this journey began. And The Big Kid in Basketball is a story of Tommy's growth and facing these challenges head on, and my growth as a parent and eventually as a coach, and how we used coaching and basketball to help him find himself and to work through a lot of these challenges. So I wrote this journal, and then eventually with Tommy's permission, I went to Tommy and I said, "Tommy, what I'm hearing from Mama and from my father is this is a message that would help people." Mm-hmm. And so I read the first journal entry to my son, who is now at this point probably 10 years old. And I said, "Tommy, I'm leaving it up to you. If you feel comfortable, I'd like to share this with folks." And so I read it, and he looked at me and he gave me a big hug and he said, "Daddy, I want to help others. Please tell our story."
Love it. Yeah.
And so that journal became a blog called The Big Kid in Basketball. And eventually I kept having all these people saying, you got to turn it into a book. You got to turn it into a book.
I hear
And
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was a woman from Northern Maine who somehow found out about this blog because I wasn't publicizing it. And she said, I read every journal entry or every blog post of The Big Kid in Basketball, and it changed me, and it helped me, and it needs to be a book. And finally I said, that's it. Now, Tracey, at the time, I had just taken a year sabbatical to write a book on healthcare. And I didn't expect to write a book about bullying and basketball and coaching and family and parenting and love. And so I had this long discussion with my bride, and we decided, okay, we're going to publish The Big Kid in Basketball first and see if it helps, and hopefully it does. And if so, so be it. And we'll do the healthcare book later. Long story short, I put the book out there, Tracey, and I'm sure you know this. With your own book, your own wonderful book, the energy around it, the people that were sharing that wanted more, and so the newspapers that reached out, and television and news stations asking about more and wanting to learn more about bullying and about adults bullying children, and of course peers bullying one another, and as you know, it gets into adults bullying adults, and so on and so forth. So the book's been out since October of 2018. Since that, and I know you've experienced the same thing, I've been asked to speak around the country about bullying and about adverse childhood experiences, so ACEs, and I'll be speaking in Canada in a couple of months at We Believe about this subject, because it's so important, and it hits and it impacts almost everybody. I was talking to someone just yesterday, and they were saying that 70% of all people are living with trauma, and a lot of that. So I see you're an expert in this area. I'm talking to someone who already knows. And so ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, bullying, these are traumas that many of us, maybe even all of us, have had inform our lives or impact our lives. And I just wanted to help. And so I'm thrilled to be on your podcast, because I know you have the same passion as to help others and to give people tools and opportunities to heal.
Absolutely. And as you know, I mean, my passion it's mental illness and suicide and bullying, and ACEs, yes, because I think the more people start to understand what adverse childhood experiences are and toxic stress, the more they can understand how it's shaping their kids' brains. And I actually, I belong to the ACEs group. They have one in Canada, but they also have a USA one. And it's quite interesting. I just completed a course on it last week. And we know what ACE is, how you mark your score to get a score out of 10. But also it was so interesting to see that they also added on a subcomponent where they look at negative environmental experiences, which are now impacting children, teenagers directly. And it was so refreshing to see bullying was listed, because there's been so many people that say, really, punch them and deal with it. If you punch them in the face, I've had so many, right? I mean, I must be honest, the worst hate mail I've got is over bullying, and it's usually from men. But, it's physical violence is the answer. And then the other is the parents should go and just deal with the parents. And or else the kid needs to grow a backbone. And it's like, in some instances, yes, the child may need to develop some strategies and skills so they're able to deflect the bullying, but it's much more complicated than people realize. And, thinking back to when I was a child, and even, when you were growing up, you can attest to it, bullying was different. It really was so different to what our kids are facing today. And people have got to take a step back and look at the big picture of what's going on in the world. and then try to understand what pressures and what our kids are being exposed to. And so I digressed a little bit, but it was so, as soon as I saw that and they had, it listed bullying is a factor, I was like, hallelujah, we're making headway.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared that, because I've been very cognizant to talk about ACEs and talk about bullying and talking about the connectivity, but it's now the research is now verifying what you and I have known to be true for a long, long time, is that connectivity.
Yes.
And when you think about in America, 500,000 children, latest report I saw, attempt suicide, and that a child who's been bullied is 9 times more likely to commit suicide. And a quick story. So here's my son was bullied since he was 4 years old, and he went on this journey, and I write this book about our journey together, and he's doing so phenomenally well, and he has his own ministry now where he's helping other children who have been bullied. And so here I am, as I mentioned, I get to talk around the country. I have this platform, and then last summer, my son comes to my wife and I, we're out on the deck at our house, and he said to us, "I need to tell you something." And we said, "What?" He said, "Did you know when I was in 4th grade, I put a belt around my neck and I was going to kill myself because of..."
Oh my goodness, bullying.
So again, Tracey, worst parent ever. We had no idea. Yes, I got to write a book and I got to be on a platform and I get to talk about others, but believe me, I'm learning every day, and I'm sure you feel the same way. And to hear what could have been. And so, yes, I when I was growing up, yes, bullying and so forth, and it was right, grow up, be a man, especially for men who have, boys who have been bullied, you hear that, be a man. What the impacts this have can lead to, it could lead to death. Oh. So it's a life and death thing. And now here's my son who's out there, as I said, he has his own ministry around this. He talks about this. He talks about seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a counselor, seeking mental health help because of the impact of bullying on his life.
Oh, yes.
So yes, he's grown in a lot of ways, and he wouldn't be the person he is today. And yet it didn't have to be that way, and it could have been a lot worse. And again, one of the points I always say to people is, I don't pretend to be an expert by any means, but I want to help. And I remember my son's coming to me the other couple of years ago when he was thinking about his ministry and how he could help people too. He said, "Dad," his words, "Dad, I'm not an expert, but you know what I can do? I can sit with someone and I can be present. I can listen to understand, and I can love them." And I thought that was so incredibly profound, especially when you connect it with Christina Bethel is out of Johns Hopkins. She does a lot of studies on ACEs and a lot of research on ACEs, and the evidence shows the more, I'll call it a love quotient, the more you can counterbalance the adverse impact of ACEs and bullying with love and that true caring that we can have for one another. Yes. The better we all are on this journey together. And I just thought he was just so brilliant. And he knew that in his heart and his mind, that when we love one another, we really can help. And I'm sure we'll get to this in a bit, we also have to be careful that our passion and our intention doesn't outweigh what we know from an evidence and research perspective really does good things, has good impacts, because we try a lot of things that don't work and actually do harm because they feel right, and we just need to be very careful about that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm so looking forward to having Tommy on the show, because I came on this journey in an unexpected way. So yes, I ended up falling down the rabbit hole and having an acute depression with suicide related to workplace bullying. But after my book was published, my intent was to talk about depression and workplace bullying in adults. And I ended up being invited to a middle school and talking to actually a class of 15-year-olds initially. And, all of a sudden, the conversation around bullying and depression and mental illness and how can they help and how do they know the signs resulted in me being invited back to their human library, which was an all-day career day. And the interesting thing was they put me down as a new author and publisher, so the kids could sign up to sit at my table and talk about how to write and publish a book. And of course, 8:30 in the morning, it's 30-minute increments throughout the day. So they'd signed up ahead of time. So a group came and sat down, 11 to 15-year-olds, and I started talking about, well, this is how you write a book. And, you know, kids like, they're all looking at each other like, what is she talking about? And you could see them shifting in their chairs. And I thought, wait a minute. And so I stopped and I said, you all seem confused. Did you know, are you at the right table? Did you sign up at my table? And they go, yes. And I said, okay, can you tell me why you signed up at my table? And they said, well, we heard about you from that English class. You're the lady that escaped the rabbit hole. And we want you to tell us how you did it. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And it was every 30 minutes, teenagers sitting down to talk about what they were struggling with, what their friends were struggling with. And it was just heartbreaking. And it was two students which changed, they all had an impact, but it was two that really changed everything for me. A 15-year-old girl, stunningly beautiful with long red hair, whispered in my ear, how can I get hold of your book? And I said, well, I've actually donated one to the school library. And then as I was talking to her, she lifted up her arm, and I lifted up her sleeve, and I looked, and there was just nothing but cats. And then she said, I've just come home from hospital. I tried to kill myself again. It was her second suicide attempt, 15 years old. And I was just like, OMG. You know, it just blows you out of the water. And then towards the end of the afternoon, because, you know, even after I'd finished my talk, there was some waiting behind to come and talk to me privately. And there was this 13-year-old boy, and he'd not participated at all. And he had his head down. I thought, there's something going on with him. He was not engaging. And he stood off at the end, and he came up to me, and he was so embarrassed, and he was stuttering and stammering. And he said, can I talk to you? Can I talk to you? And I went, of course you can. And he literally fell into my shoulder, sobbing his heart out. And he said, I've been in the rabbit hole for 7 years. When will I escape? And I went out, and I actually spent a good 20-25 minutes talking with him privately. You know, I said, let me take you to the school teacher or the school counselor. And he goes, no, I don't want to talk to them. I want to talk to you. Tell me how you escaped the rabbit hole. And after talking with him, he calmed down, and I, you know, made some suggestions, and I gave him my phone number so his mum could call me later to talk about, you know, what had happened. And at the end of the afternoon, the counselor, the school counselor came in, and she started bullying me. She actually said to me, you have no business talking to these kids. That's my job. You came for career day. And I looked at her and I said, when they come to me and they want to talk about something that's very personal, I'm not going to push them away. I said, the first thing I do is say, would you like me? I'll walk you to the counselor. I said, but they don't want to talk to you. I said, they wanted to talk to me because I've been there. And she said, oh, well, referring to the boy, she says, I don't know why you waste your time with him. He's a lost cause. A school counselor telling me, don't waste your time. He's a lost cause. And at that point, I'm glad there was a table in front of me because I wanted to go across the table. And I looked at her and I said, with an attitude like that, now I understand why so many of the kids here are hurting. I said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You have no idea. And I went home, and I sobbed my heart out all the way home. I must have looked a mess. But 63 kids that afternoon came and opened up to me. 63. And I was talking to a friend, a doctor, and he said, that's your purpose. And I went, no, it's not. And he goes, I want you to think about it. He said, you went over for career day, and 63 kids who don't know you from Adam except you wrote a book and word of mouth came from an English class. 63 kids opened up to you and said, that is your purpose. And I fought it for a couple of weeks. And then, you know what it's like. They say once something is decided for you, it's in your face all the time, right? Over and over and over again. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And here I am. And every day you learn something new. And every day you hear of a heartbreaking story that kind of keeps propelling you forward, because I must be honest, sometimes seeing the news and reading all these things that the kids are going through and what they have to deal with, I am so overwhelmed that I think I can't do this. And then I think, if I am feeling like this, how are they feeling? And it's, as I said, I'm not an expert. Yes, I have my nursing behind me and the psychology part of it, but I've walked the walk and talked the talk, as you have, as Tommy has. And with kids, we know trust is such a huge issue, especially with adults. And so many kids have said to me, why would I go talk to somebody who's never, ever experienced whatever they happen to be going through, when I can talk to someone who can say, I know exactly how you feel. I have been there. And I think it's us together. I've always said, no one can do this in isolation. We all have to work together and share our stories and support and inspire and encourage everyone. You know, that we should be able to deal with bullying if we all stand together. But too many people are being bystanders, right? We've got to start encouraging more adults, more parents to be the upstanders.
It's so true, and so many things just bubbled up for me with that story. So first of all, kudos to you for number one, being there, for being open to what your purpose is, for caring and for loving those kids, those 63 kids. You've changed lives. There's no doubt about that, and that's absolutely huge. There's a woman that, and she's allowed me. So I wrote the book, The Big Kid in Basketball. There's another book that myself and many other people contributed to called Bullied Back to Life, that's actually coming out.
Yes, I just mentioned that in the bio. Yes, which is perfect. Awesome. Yes.
And so Sarah Newman and her daughter,
Kate.
Exactly.
Yes, I know that. Yeah.
And so my guess is you know her poem, Kay's poem, or you know of it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind, I'd love to excerpt a few pieces of it, because it reminds me of what you just said. Because so Sarah's this amazing woman. She's a single mother, and her daughter's name is Kay. Kay has been bullied relentlessly at school. The school has not provided the supports that Kay needed. So similar to, again, this is why it bubbled up, because of what you were just talking about. So Kay wrote this poem, and I'm going to excerpt it. It says, "We're all the same. You can't blame me. This is not a game. We don't want to live this way. Bullying is not okay." This is a fourth grader. "They get us in the blind spot. Mm-hmm. It's like a never-ending bad dream. It's a day you will never forget. It's a hot potato. It's a huge issue that keeps on going and going and never stops, but gets worse. It's like a curse from Mr. Universe. It's everywhere. It's in the air. People think it's rare. It's more common than you think. Sadly, people just ignore it. We don't want to live this way. It feels like," again, fourth grader, "it feels like school's a death trap.
Yes. It's
just cruel. You're left with a broken heart. Bullying is like a creature of the school. It feels like a stabbing pain. This needs to be stopped. We're all human. We're all different in our own way. It's kind of like a never-ending Monday."
Yes.
This is a fourth grader.
I know. And she's one of thousands of fourth graders, and every other grade that deals with this. And it frustrates me, and it breaks my heart. And then I'm overwhelmingly disappointed that there's no accountability from the school systems, especially when every single one of them has to have an anti-bullying policy implemented. And yet, the stories I hear of the failure to follow through, or that they have responded, but unfortunately, if mummy or daddy are very rich and influential and may contribute money, it's brushed under the carpet, and it has to stop. I mean, parents have such a strong voice, and to me, if one child is being bullied in a class and the others aren't being bullied, but they're aware of it, as parents, why aren't they taking a stand, going to the school board, going to the PTA meetings? Because to me, if you know of it and you're just like, yay, it's not my child, you're being a bystander. And if, you know, be an upstander. All parents get together to protect all children.
Exactly. In basketball, and again, part of Tommy's healing, quite frankly, my healing, was we use basketball. And in the game of basketball, there's a term called, when you're playing defense, called keep your head on a swivel. And what that means is I might be covering another person's, and so I have my eye on that person, but I also need to have my head on a swivel so I can also see what's happening on the other side of the court. Maybe my person doesn't have the ball, but the ball's over there, so I need to see what's happening there. Someone might be doing a backdoor cut, meaning running behind me to the hoop. I need to have my head on a swivel so I can see that too.
Yeah.
I use that terminology to express what you just expressed so incredibly well, which is, as parents, as other children, our heads need to always be on a swivel to take care of our own child, thinking as a parent, and also that child over there, and that child over there, and that child behind me. And so, yes, together with our head on a swivel, using that term,
I love
we
it.
have to care about all of us, because, like I said, this is life and death. It's not be a man or be a grown-up or whatever. It is, we need to care and we need to love, because this is impacting people when they're children in that immediate moment. It's impacting them when they're considering that suicidal ideation and in many cases suicide. It's impacting them longitudinally into their adulthood. When I was running a health center in Maine, there was a woman that came in one time and she said, long story short, so her primary care doctor, her words, said that she said he kicked her off his patient panel. I mean, he kicked her out of the practice. She was diagnosed as being morbidly obese. And he said to her, he said, "Do you want to live?" This is before he kicked her out of the practice. And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" Now, I'm hoping he was asking that for motivation.
Yes.
So I'm hoping. So she said, "Because I have a granddaughter and I want to see her get married." He says, "Great. Here's your diet. Here's your exercise program. Go do it." Now, I'm giving you the real short version. Her words, she did it, tried three times, her words, she failed. He says, "You're not listening to me. I can't help you anymore. Go find a new doctor." That's when he kicked her off. She came to our practice. Over time, and you alluded to this, not alluded, you actually said this earlier, you need to have trust. You need to have a relationship. You really want to hear people, and people will talk to you. So over time, we developed a relationship and trust with this woman. And what she shared, Tracey, was that when she was a child, she was bullied by coaches. She was bullied that she was too fat. Yeah. She was bullied because she couldn't do, I think it was not pull-ups, but your chin-ups or whatever they were. She couldn't do enough, and she was called fat. "You're too fat." They did pinch tests in front of everyone and said, "You're too fat." Her word, she developed an unhealthy relationship to food. Yes. And again, her word, she hated her own body. So now here's this primary care physician who's saying, "Oh, you need to," without saying it, "love your body and take care of yourself." He had no clue what bullying had done to this woman and how it impacted her throughout her life. And so the point is that you're right. A lot of people marginalize the people being bullied, and they also minimize the bullying itself. And this has such impacts on people's lives. It has such impacts, especially when you combine it with ACEs. And I love that you said how they're bringing it all together. I mean, neurodevelopment, social and emotional cognitive impairment, high-risk behavior adoption, diseases, early death. This is because of bullying and ACEs. So it's not this little thing and toughen up, but it is us as a community must come together and realize the adverse impact, quite frankly, that we're all having on one another, when we could do just the opposite by loving people and caring about them. You also said something that I don't want to get lost because I think it's incredibly important. When you were telling that story about being at that school, and I think you said there was a girl and she was beautiful. I think you said she had long red hair and she had been cutting. My daughter, Samantha, she won the Miss Maine USA. She competed in the Miss USA. She's beautiful.
She's gorgeous. She's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yes, she is.
Again, talk about worst parent ever. She told us not too long ago that in high school, she used to eat by herself in the bathroom because she was being bullied.
Oh, my goodness.
So the point is, just like you said, it's not just like my son who is heavy. It's not people will be bullied for whatever. And so we need to not think that, oh, that person has money, so they're not going to be bullied. They're okay. Or that person's beautiful, or that person's this, or that person's that. It's all of us. We all have challenges, and we all need to be cared for and loved. And those people that are doing the bullying, they need healing too. Because what has led them down that pathway?
I agree. And that's where I get lots of the hate mail, is because I say, but there is a reason behind every behavior. And that, yes, we absolutely must help the victim.
Absolutely.
But we also need to help the bully. Why is this teen choosing to inflict so much pain and hurt on another person? Because ultimately we know that it doesn't matter what they do and how many people they have around them, their assistants, or that they're buoyed by the bystanders, because a bystander sends a message just like the bully. It doesn't matter what they do, they will never heal and they will never feel truly happy. It's only a short-term solution to long-term pain. And when I say we have to address what's going on in the bully's life and try and be a little bit more understanding, because what if the bully is a 15-year-old girl who's been sexually abused by her uncle? Yes, her behavior is not appropriate. However, what is she going through? And I think we need to be, you've used the word loving. I say we need to become more compassionate and understanding and kinder. We're so full of comparison, comparing ourselves to others and wanting to be the bigger, the best, and take a step back. Just because someone looks like they have the perfect life, chances are you walk inside that house and it could be hell. Don't judge, get to know the person and get to understand what's going on. And we're so, and it's not just the United States and Canada that are guilty of this. Globally, we have a problem everywhere that we love to finger point and blame. Or we like to look at someone and say, oh, she's stunningly beautiful. Yeah, right, she's got a problem. She's being bullied. Yes. It's don't start labeling people, and making that stereotypical assumption of, well, she can't be bullied. Look at her, she's, we've got to stop. We've got to take a step back, and we've got to actually put our own house in order before we cast aspersions onto other people. It's not a pleasant world we're living in right now.
That's exactly right. And again, you say so many important things. I try to keep up. One of the things you said was judging and labeling, and one of the terms you hear a lot now, and I work in healthcare, and you hear accountability.
Yes.
We need to hold people accountable. And if you really, I have a quality improvement background, if you think about Deming and in quality improvement, what he talks about is the 94-6 rule, which means that if you achieve a bad, I'm going to use a specific aspect of it. If you achieve a bad outcome, 94% of the time it's because of a system, and 6% of the time it's because of a person. And yet what do? We blame people. We think you're bad, you need to change, you need to be fixed, or whatever it might be, rather than look in the mirror, especially as healthcare leaders, and say, what type of system did I create that led to these behaviors? Now, if it is a person issue, then you hold that person accountable. If it's a system issue, we need to hold ourselves accountable. And when we think about schools, and we think about what type of system, school system, was created that led to these types of things, or what type of, again, we can carry that forward. The point being is, yes, we need to hold people accountable, and we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with our, think about school administration. We need to, that's where it starts. And then as we keep going down the chain, for lack of a better term, and then, yes, that bullies, those behaviors are not acceptable. And your example is so spot on. A child who's being abused at home, that is now manifesting bad behaviors that are harming others, again, we need to care about that person too. In addition to the children are now on the wrong end of the behaviors that are being exhibited. It's, when you think about complexity, science, or complexity of this world, we want things to be black and white. Well, they're not.
They're not.
And, we can't live in this black and white space. We have to live in that gray space and really figure out, how do we care for all of these people and hold the right people accountable and ensure those behaviors are not tolerated? And so it's a both and multiple ands as we go through this process.
Yes.
And as we talked about earlier, it has to be from the heart, our passion, one, to do the right thing, but also from our mind, in the sense that it's based on research, it's based on evidence. And I know you've talked about this too. A lot of times we get so caught up with, I got to do something. And we implement these policies that, quite frankly, one, and I think you alluded to this, a lot of the schools have this no bullying policies or anti-bullying policies. Well, a lot of times it's just check the box. I got my policy, now I'm going to put it on the shelf, and I can say to anyone who's overseeing me, yep, I got it. Some take it another step. They not only have the policy written and sent in a 3-ring binder on a shelf, but they actually start to implement policies that actually do great harm. So zero tolerance policy.
Don't get me started on that.
Okay. I know you know all of this. So zero tolerance policies leads to more bad behavior, conflict resolution, peer mediation. Let's just tell the victim that, guess what? It was just a disagreement and you're just as much fault as the person that's bullying you. I'm sorry. Doesn't work, leads to harm. I know you all know all this. The group treatment for children, we actually just created a peer group for bullies to learn from one another to bully even more. These are things that come from good intention. And what's the old saying? The pathway or the roadway, the highway to hell is paved with good intention. Yeah. It's good intention, and yet there's not enough evidence or research behind it to show that's actually going to have good impact. And so what we talk about, my son and I talk about a great deal, is yes, we got to have that good intention, but we also have to have good impact, because if we don't have the impact that we're seeking, that's going to help people, help the victims of bullying, help the people that are doing the bullying, helping the people that are now being adversely impacted by both of those people, it's not worth doing. So you have to ensure that you're marrying heart and mind with everything we do to make things better.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, my vision, my hope, we all have these dreams of what we would like to see happen. In schools, I've always said, I would like to see mental health awareness and education brought in from the moment a child starts school, preschool. And it's just learning the skill. Let's teach the basic values of kindness and compassion and understanding and recognition that we're all different, but everyone has gifts, and then the strategies of coping with stress and anxiety, right? And failure. Failure is a dirty word now. And I don't like the word failure because I don't believe anyone else fails. It means at that time they did not achieve what they set out to do. But it's a learning opportunity. And if we started educating kids, I think they are better equipped to go through the school years. But also, we know bullying is such a huge, huge problem. And I don't understand why states are not holding their schools accountable, considering they're giving lots of them the funding And there are certain laws that you can look at that can be implemented, that can reduce the funding. But why are they not encouraging their school to be upstanders and involving the parents? Because, as you know, right, there's been so many instances just last week alone, the little girl at 6 who was handcuffed, restrained, and taken by the policeman out of class. And then the girl that was hit across the eye by the teacher. Now we have all this media, all right, and the school is held accountable. Why are they getting to that point? Why aren't they implementing things? I'm a huge, and in healthcare you've got to be the same. Let's deal with the problem upstream. We do not want to deal with the catastrophe downstream. And the money that you waste putting out the fires, let's put it to good use. It just continues to frustrate and boggle me every time I read of a parent saying, but I went to the school all the time and they did nothing. And it's like, oh my goodness, how do we begin?
It's such a great point. I love that you reference healthcare as well. In healthcare, there's patient and family advisory councils, or PFACs. When they're done as a check the box, I have a PFAC because, someone's looking at me and wants to make sure I have this thing, they don't work. When they're truly done well, when we're actually engaging patients and families in not only creating policy, but then implementing policy and ensuring policy is actually aligned with patient and family experience and based on the data and being carried through, and is not just the check the box, then you can actually have a really positive impact.
Yes.
So I had actually carried that into sports. So again, basketball helped my son so very much and helped me as well. So what we created was player and family advisory councils, so that sports leagues, so that school sports leagues engage players and families that are not necessarily, in fact, are not going through a crisis at the moment, but rather are at that place that have been coached, have been educated as to, we're here to help all children, not just your children. Yes, your child too, but all children.
Yes.
And so that their wisdom, that child's voice is heard and that family's voice is heard. And because how often do you hear, oh, that coach is a bad coach for X, Y, and Z reason? And sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not so much. And I just wanted more playing time or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But when you actually create these PFACs, player and family advisory councils, when you have players and families and the coaches and administration coming together to make things better, then, and doing it for the right reason, then we can actually have an impact. And I would say the same thing with schools. We give
Definitely.
PTAs and so forth, but we don't use them appropriately. We don't engage them appropriately. We do it around budgets and around all these other things, as opposed to the health and well-being of our children. And then, of course, if we do it well, of the teachers as well, and the families
Absolutely.
and the community. So I believe there's pathways. I believe there's specific tools. That's just one of many. It's going to take, and I say this about healthcare too, we spend a lot of money and energy and resource on a new financial model or a new technology. And I've seen every one of them manipulated for good and manipulated for bad. What we really need is people of integrity who really care, that can marry heart and mind to do the right thing always. And that's what it really takes, is people like you and your voice and my son and his voice and my daughter and her voice, and coming together and to help others for the right reason and doing it the right way.
I 100% agree. And I totally love that idea. And I think this is another reason for the podcast, is by sharing thoughts and ideas. And that if there's parents or grandparents or, even teachers watching this and they're going, okay, maybe this is something that together we can do, and let's go to the school and let's see if we can start introducing that. Because, as I said, the aim is, can you hear that? Yes, I think we all need to stand together. That is the key. Just as, Tom and I are talking about bullying and ACEs, we are one of many awesome people out there globally. And I think if we all come together and share our thoughts and what we can do to make a difference in our kids' lives, then we're making a little bit of groundwork. So I pulled you back just for a 5-minute exit, Tom, but I didn't want it to suddenly go up in the air with everyone thinking there was a fire on your end.
No, I appreciate that.
So what I'd like you to do is maybe to share some parting thoughts, some parting words to parents or grandparents, or siblings, anyone who has a child, a teenager in their lives, and to share some wisdom about what would you encourage them to do to help their kids?
It's such a great and important question. So back when I was with the National Institute for Children's Health Quality, one of the things that we created there was what we call 10 steps to bench bullying. Okay. And it's a step-by-step on, again, what we can do to have a positive impact in this area. I'm going to start with number 10, though, because a lot of times we're outward facing. We're thinking, like we talked about earlier, it's about blaming, it's about identifying and holding accountable. The first thing we must do, especially as parents, and also if we're a child as a friend, is listen. Listen to your child, listen to your friends, and don't listen to respond, because as humans, we're programmed to listen to respond. But really open up your heart and really open up your mind and listen to understand. And sometimes this means as parents, and like I said, I've learned so much that I didn't do right. And yes, it does hurt. And yet now I can communicate that, and hopefully someone will learn from my lessons, is, again, really be vulnerable. And my son Tommy talks about being courageously vulnerable. Be vulnerable to hear. And sometimes you're going to hear stuff you don't want to hear. And sometimes it's going to be scary. And you're going to go to that place of being afraid. And we don't want to go to those places because that's painful. And yet we need to. And also sometimes you're going to hear some amazing stories of caring and loving and an opportunity to connect as people. And that's amazing, and it's a blessing. But both are blessings, because we need all that information to make things better. So I would start there. When we developed that 10 steps, we talked about such things as, if you're thinking about sports, and again, that sports really helped my son to a great extent, be there, show up yourself. Yes. A lot of times what we do is, we drop them off and then we go off and we do our thing. Be there. And as we talked about earlier, that term, keep your head on a swivel. Yes, watch out for your child, but watch out for the other children too. Yes. And watch out for those other children on the other team and the people that are in the stands. Tracey earlier said that bullying has gotten worse over time. There was a news station did a story on the book, The Big Kid in Bullying, and they talked to another coach who said, just like you said, it's gotten worse. You hear the bullying from the stands, from parents to other children on other teams, from parents to their own child out on the court or on the field, to people with one another. We have to stop that. We can't keep saying they have to stop it. We have to stop it. And so show up and then keep your head on a swivel and look out for others.
I love that.
Ensure a safe home environment. Again, we're always outward facing, but let's talk about those things we can do. And what does safe mean? Well, safe means lots of different things. From, we just had a fire alarm, so that's a form of safety. But what I really want to focus on today is emotional safety. When your child says something to you that scares you, that you're afraid of, that you never wanted to hear, be there and listen. And you don't have to have the right answer, at least not at that moment, but be there and listen and acknowledge that you're hearing something incredibly important. And then go find experts. That's another tip. Go find the experts. When this was happening to my son, to Tommy, I was lucky to be working for the National Institute for Children's Health Quality, so NICHQ, because I got to talk to these experts. I got to hear about these things, from bullying to ACEs and so forth. And so reach out and find those people, because we're going to want to do a lot of things. And like my bride and I, we made a lot of mistakes because we didn't have all the answers, and we still don't, but we still keep looking for those experts. So be there. If your child needs mental health support, emotional support, get them that help. Yes, truth. There is stigma. There still is. That's a fact. And yet it's that important. You got to be courageously vulnerable. And just as my son talks about, go and help them get that help. create that bridge, that pathway, whatever it takes to get them the help they need. It's that important. I would also say, talk with other parents, talk with other people, talk with those people that maybe they're the ones that everyone goes to. Great. Maybe they're the ones that are saying things that you don't want to hear. Go have that conversation too, but do it from a place of trying to understand as opposed to, again, holding them accountable or blaming. First, find out what's happening. Then we can figure out where we go from there. Get that additional information. So the 10 steps, they're online at tbkid.org. They're in the book, but I just wanted to focus on those specific ones today for your audience, because I think those are the ones that we can control the most, which is really looking inward before we start looking outward.
I 100% agree. And every time I do my YouTube videos and my accompanying articles, I always say, be there and listen. Listen with a capital L. And I think the final one, show love. Show love always. Your kids have got to know how much they are loved. And that isn't necessarily by buying something new.
So true.
Yes.
So true.
I thank you so much, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. I am so very honored that you are my very first guest. And I wish you all the very best. I can't wait to talk to your son. I think it'll be an amazing podcast. And I thank you for all that you were doing to make a difference in the world.
Oh, Tracey, I appreciate you, and I'm honored to be on your show and to be the first guest. That's amazing. It's what you do every day, and I know it's hard, and I know it tears all of us down sometimes as we're trying to help others. You just keep showing up, and you keep bringing wisdom, and you bring passion, and you bring that caring, and it takes all of that, and it takes all of us. So again, thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And everyone, stay tuned. We're going to break 30 seconds, and there you will find all about Tom's book, The Big Kid in Basketball, plus all his social media links, and you do need to connect with him. And we'll be right back.
With more than 35 years of experience leading, serving, and coaching, Thomas Dahlborg also volunteers for a wide range of nonprofits and loves his time sponsoring and coaching young men's basketball. Tom cares deeply about helping individuals, teams, and communities to achieve their mission while living their values, and cherishes the opportunity to engage in meaningful and impactful ways. Thomas Dahlborg is also a child advocate and an international voice for children, specifically in the area of stopping bullying and its devastating impact. Tom recently contributed to the new book, Bullied Back to Life, and is the author of his own book, The Big Kid in Basketball, and the lessons he taught his father and coach. And through his writings and speaking, he's working to put an end to bullying and mitigate the impact of ACEs for both children and adults. Visit Tom on his social media at Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and make sure to check out his website at tbkid.org. That's tbkid.org.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed our podcast, our premiere podcast with Thomas Dahlborg. And please do follow him on social media. His posts are extremely enlightening and informative. And pick up a copy of his book, The Big Kid and Basketball. And stay tuned, because his son Tommy will be a podcast in the next few months. So here we go. Podcast number 1 done. Podcast number 2 next Thursday. Actually, my second very special guest is going to be Dr. Suzanne Henwood from New Zealand, and she's going to be talking about mental health, mental wellness, and how we can help empower our kids and teenagers as they struggle with all the challenges that life is throwing at them, hurtling at them, I should say. Please consider subscribing to Podbean, podcast.com, so you automatically get notified whenever a new podcast is aired. And as it is the premiere podcast, I thought I would offer a signed copy of my book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, My Journey through depression. So to the first 2 viewers who go to my website, www.traceymaxfield.com, go to the contact form and send in a message with the words podcast number 1, book gift. You will get a signed copy regardless of where you are in the world. So as we draw this podcast to an end, I'd like you all to remember that together we can help our kids and we can give them a brave new future to look forward to. And together, if we all work together, we can take a stand and say no to bullying. We can also help our kids who are dealing with mental health challenges, mental illness or disorder, or feeling suicidal. Together, we can and we will make a difference. Thank you again for your time, and join me again next week on podcast number 2, Engage, Educate, and Empower. Have a good week.